Good morning. We're here with Karen Stamm, and I'm Nancy McClintock with Gardening Volunteers of South Texas. And we are visiting in Karen's yard, which is quite a transformation, quite an accomplishment, Karen. And I wanted to have you explain how it is that you went about thinking about making this transition, what motivated you to do it, and how did you implement an overall design, or did you take it in sections? I guess that's a lot to ask at one time, but maybe you can just kind of run through some of the stages of what you did for us.
Okay. When I moved here in 2007, the yard was all turf grass and dying. There were 2 trees, no shrubs, and as a gardener, I looked at that and said, a clean palette.
Oh, nice.
And so I always did have a goal of making the entire yard a xeriscape. And it was daunting. It got easier for me when I joined Gardening Volunteers of South Texas 3 years later, because then I had access to a lot of information, a lot of experts. I could talk to other people who had done this and get ideas. So what I did was I solarized the entire yard by putting black plastic held down by bricks. And I didn't do the whole yard at one time. I'd do sections. And then once the grass was gone, then I began to work the soil, and then I had to come up with a planting.
Well, that's another good question. Did you have a lot of issues with rock, or do you have pretty good soil in your yard?
No, we've got soil here in this area that is very much like hard clay. So it was not easy, I will tell you that. And so what I did is kind of divide the entire lot. I'm on a corner lot, into sections. And I just worked on one section at a time.
So you kept it manageable.
I did. And affordable.
Yes, that's a good point.
Yes. So I looked at commercial landscapes. I looked at other yards I admired. Through Gardening Volunteers, we have this yard tour every year, and I got a lot of good ideas from that. And a lot of it's just trial and error. I wasn't worried about what to plant, because we have a lot of good booklets through Gardening Volunteers, but it was how to place things. And the way I figured that out was to look at the mature size of what something was going to be. So when I first planted it, the plants looked very far apart, but when they got to be full size, I didn't have to replant them. I didn't have to be pruning them every month, and really my overall goal was to save water. And that was why I felt Gardening Volunteers was such a good fit for me, because I wanted to do this with a greater purpose. I like to garden, sure, but I wanted to garden in a way that would save water, and that would be an example, because I'm on a corner. People, are walking by all the time,
Right.
And they'll ask me about it. One woman came by not long ago, and she said, "I remember when you had that plastic all over your yard." And she says, "You've come a long way."
Oh. Well, and I noticed that you've developed some pathways. Has that been in a way to assist with your gardening, or to develop areas for seating and outdoor living? What did you have in mind?
It was really for both. I use a wheeled cart to get, to move around my bags of soil or bark. So I needed a pathway. But the pathway also served as a good visual. You know, it helped me distinguish one part from another. And so, yeah, the paths were really a real help. And I pretty much just placed them where I thought they would be the most usable, you know. That part was strictly just common sense. It wasn't a design element. And I've got to drag a hose around.
Right.
I don't have any irrigation system, so all the plants are watered by hand, and I needed those paths to
Access your different areas.
yes, exactly.
And you do have a little bit of an elevation with your property. Do you have much trouble with water runoff or erosion in your yard? And if you do, what kinds of things have you done to counteract that?
Yes, I never really considered how much of a slope I had on this yard until we had some heavy rains, and I watched the bark mulch and the soil going into the road, and I thought, okay, we're going to have to do something to mitigate that. I would have loved to terrace. Terracing is not something you can really do on your own, and it's expensive. So I decided to put in metal edging to kind of slow the water down. Then I put in rocks of various sizes to slow the water down more. And then in front of the rock, between the yard and the sidewalk, I made a 2-layer edge with chop block.
Okay. Well, it's very attractive, and I notice you've been able to establish your Inferno Strip with some plantings too. You must have had a real method with what you selected and your placement of those also. That's not an easy area to establish.
No, it's not, because it's 2 feet wide. And so, well, wait a minute, I guess it's 4 feet wide. But you really don't want to have shrubs that get much bigger than 2, because you don't want to have to be pruning these things off the sidewalk every 5 minutes. And so this is where I really learned a lot from the San Antonio water system through our gardening volunteer meetings. They taught us about the Inferno Strip, because so many neighborhoods have them. The San Antonio water system calls that little strip of land the Inferno Strip. And it really is, because you've got the light bouncing off the sidewalk and the street. So you have to be really careful to put plants in there that don't require much water, can take full sun. And I wanted to pick plants that didn't get much bigger than 2 feet around, because that strip is only 4 feet. And I didn't want to have to do too much pruning.
So that made it more manageable for you.
It did.
Well, this has been a really nice experience, and we appreciate you allowing us to come and share your landscape. And I see we've got some monarchs coming
we do.
through.
Yes.
So thank you so much for sharing with us, Karen.
Well, you're welcome, Nancy. It was a privilege to do so.